Barefoot shoes are not for everyone. Sure, there's a lot of hype around them, and I think for good reason. But there's way more to barefoot shoes than just putting them on and going about your day. Transitioning takes effort, and if you rush it, you can do more harm than good. So today, I want to walk you through how to transition to barefoot shoes thoughtfully and safely. There is a ton of information in this video, and I've left timestamps in case you want to jump around. I've also left resources in the description below. Let's quickly clarify what barefoot shoes are. They have a wide toe box so your feet can splay naturally, a thin, flexible sole to connect you with the earth, and a zero-drop heel so that your heels are level with the balls of your feet. They also have an upper portion that fully connects your foot to the shoe, so there's no need to grip your toes when walking. So unfortunately, that means flip-flops are not barefoot shoes. And by the way, Crocs aren't barefoot shoes either. I've received a lot of comments about Crocs over the years, and so let's just set the record straight now. But if you're thinking about transitioning to barefoot shoes, it's important to understand the problems with modern shoes. The thick sole restricts your foot's flexibility, the narrow toe box cramps your natural movement, and that raised heel robs you of your innate springiness. To make matters worse, excessive cushioning weaken your feet, and weak feet are not a solid foundation for anything. It's a bit of a vicious cycle because these supportive shoes can end up causing all sorts of issues throughout the kinetic chain. That's your feet, ankles, knees, hips, spine, and so on. They're all interconnected and rely on one another so you can move properly. Your posture, for example, is affected when you wear shoes with a raised heel. They cause your body to tilt forward, and it can even change the curvature of your spine. Ultimately, our footwear and the health of our feet play a crucial role in many of the pains and injuries we face in our modern lives. Enter barefoot shoes. These offer just the right amount of protection from the elements and debris, all while allowing our feet, and our body for that matter, to move the way it's naturally meant to. The lack of cushion helps us feel what's underneath our feet, and they keep our feet stronger than when we wear modern shoes. And thousands of years ago, when people first started wearing shoes, they were designed with the simple purpose of protecting our feet. But because most of us have spent the majority of our lives wearing shoes that atrophy our feet and change our gait, we need to be thoughtful in our approach to transitioning to barefoot shoes. And while we're going to talk about the specifics of how to transition, the ultimate goal is to improve your foot health. Everyone has a different starting point, and even if you choose to not transition to barefoot shoes, working on your foot strength and mobility will likely benefit you in the long run. But before you change up any footwear, it's important to get a baseline and assess the current state of your feet. Like I said earlier, barefoot shoes are not for everyone. And for those of you who may have any of the following issues listed on the screen, it's extra important for you to seek professional and/or medical guidance, which is not me. But I'll put some resources in the description of this video. With that out of the way, there are a few initial questions to consider, and I think these can serve as an anchor for this whole transition process. Do you have any pre-existing foot conditions? What is the current state of your foot mobility? How often do you spend time barefoot during the day and the week? And how sensitive are the bottoms of your feet? Now, you might be wondering what I'm talking about when I say foot mobility. Foot mobility is essentially the range of motion and flexibility in the joints of the foot and how well your feet can move and adapt to different surfaces. And it also reduces your risk of injury. So how do you assess your foot mobility? There are a ton of different tests that you can do. These assessments focus on a few key things: your big toe, ankle, forefoot, coordination, and balance. To keep this video a reasonable length, I'm gonna list out a bunch of different ones that you can do, along with some exercises to improve your foot mobility. And I'll provide links in the description for more detailed instructions. When you perform these tests and exercises, you'll wanna pay attention to your range of motion, symmetry, or differences between your feet, control, and coordination. And I hope it goes without saying, but if you experience any pain, back off of what you're doing, don't push through it, listen to your body. Moving on to the other questions I mentioned earlier, and I think they go hand in hand. How much time do you spend barefoot during the day and the week, and how sensitive are the bottoms of your feet? We often spend the majority of our time wearing shoes. In fact, a lot of people are only barefoot first thing in the morning and at the very end of the day. Or maybe when you're at home, you're barefoot, but how much time are you really spending walking around? To transition to barefoot shoes, you need to spend more time barefoot and get your feet accustomed to natural movement and different surfaces. You're essentially waking up all of the nerves in your feet, and you're building up a tolerance to walking without the cushion and support of shoes. This process takes time, and it can be a humbling experience. There are all sorts of ways to go about this. Ideally, in the modern world we live in, you should spend time walking around on both natural and unnatural surfaces. Your unnatural surfaces, so things like carpet, concrete, hardwood floors, that's gonna be pretty easy to come across. But natural surfaces like grass, rocks, dirt, sand, they may be harder to come across depending on where you live and what your schedule looks like. But if you're able to get a little outside time during the day, take off your shoes and socks and walk around barefoot, assuming that it is safe and appropriate to do so. If getting outside and walking around on uneven terrain isn't an option, there are all sorts of textured mats that you can stand and walk on. I have one from Spacer Mobility that I use periodically throughout the day, and it really wakes my feet up. And it does take some getting used to depending on how sensitive the bottoms of your feet are. And remember, we're playing the long game, so whatever surfaces you're walking on, start slow and try to make a little progress each week. And ideally, you'll be increasing the amount of time you spend barefoot and working on your foot mobility and foot strength at the same time. Let's finally talk about the actual transition to barefoot shoes. Not surprisingly, this process should be gradual and it looks different for everyone. When picking out the shoe you want to transition to, there are a few different routes that you can take. The first is a shoe with a wide toe box, a zero drop heel, and built-in cushion. So technically it is not a barefoot shoe, but it's barefoot shoe-ish. Ultra Escalantes are a great example, and they were actually the shoes that made my barefoot shoe transition such a positive experience, especially if you are not wanting to give up cushioned shoes just yet. Something to keep in mind with Ultras in particular, not all of their models are zero drop, and some just have a really excessive amount of cushion. And keep in mind there are some other brands out there that have similar styled shoes, but those are the ones that I'm familiar with and that I feel comfortable recommending. Now the second route I would recommend is going with a true barefoot shoe. So minimal cushion and more sole flexibility than you'll find in the Ultras, but also getting a barefoot shoe insole to help with the transition. North Sole is a company that makes barefoot shoe specific insoles. They have a 3mm and a 6mm version. I've used these insoles with Vivo Barefoot, Feel Grounds, and Zero Shoes, and it's been a very positive experience. I actually have a discount code for them. I'll link it down below in the description, but having an insole to transition and get used to the lack of cushion is so helpful, because honestly, I think that's the hardest part. At least it was for me. And as far as best barefoot shoes for beginners, I plan on making that video in the near future, but I'll share some of my top picks on the screen and I'll also list them down below. Now, in an ideal world where cost isn't an issue, I would recommend a third route, which is really routes 1 and 2. So getting a pair of the more cushioned barefoot-ish shoes like the Ultras and getting a true barefoot shoe with the insoles. But I know that's pricey, that is not realistic for everyone, but I do think it is worth mentioning. That said, one of the most important things to consider, regardless of budget, is how you'll handle walking on harder surfaces like concrete. Now, when we're in nature, the surfaces that we walk on are soft and varied. But most of us live in concrete jungles, and practically every surface we walk on is flat and hard. And there is a lot of debate about whether walking in barefoot shoes on concrete is good for your body. Now is a good time for me to remind you that I am not a doctor, I am not an expert, I am not a professional in this space. But I am going to recommend you check out Katie Bowman, who is a professional in this space. She's written a ton of books, including Move Your DNA, which is actually the book that motivated me and inspired me to make this transition, and another book called Whole Body Barefoot. I recommend checking out both books. And she provides tons of exercises and stretches to help you strengthen and support your kinetic chain. Katie Bowman's stance is that walking exclusively on hard, flat surfaces like concrete isn't ideal. And this is because it places stress on your body in ways that natural surfaces just don't. So she recommends walking on a variety of different surfaces, ideally more natural ones, while also incorporating foot strengthening exercises. And she also argues that a gradual transition to barefoot shoes will help reduce your risk of injury, and it'll help your body adapt accordingly. Now, Daniel Lieberman is another professional in this space, and while he also stresses the importance of a gradual transition to barefoot shoes, in addition to foot and leg strengthening exercises, he argues that walking on concrete is manageable in barefoot shoes as long as you adapt your gait to more of a forefoot, midfoot strike rather than a heel strike, which is what we tend to do when we wear more cushioned modern shoes. So in my non-expert opinion, and to summarize the key takeaways I hope you get from this video, I would recommend the following. Determine if transitioning to barefoot shoes is right for you. Assess the current state of your feet. Strengthen your feet. Work on foot mobility and overall mobility because everything is connected. Spend more time barefoot walking around on different types of surfaces, both natural and unnatural. Invest in the right shoes and/or insoles to support your transition. Start slow and focus on the baby steps. Listen to your body and get curious and do your own research. Like I said before, I've included a bunch of resources in the description of this video, including a playlist of all sorts of barefoot shoe reviews that I've done in the past, with more to come soon. So I want to hear from you in the comments, whether or not you've attempted this transition, and if you have attempted it, where are you in your journey? How has it been going? Or maybe you fully transitioned. Are there any lessons learned that you want to share with people who are just starting out? And maybe there are resources that you would recommend that I haven't listed. Let me know so I can add them to the description. With that said, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please let me know. Leave a like or maybe hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And I've picked out a few other videos that I thought you might enjoy, so I will see you in the next one.